Okay, I just realized my mic was on mute all that time that I was talking. Can you all hear me now? Can I get a thumbs up? I apologize. I'm going to try to go through all of that again very, very fast. My name is Crystal Jennings. Welcome to our panel presentation about historically Black colleges and universities, tribal colleges and universities, and other minority-serving institutions. We will discuss some of the sustainability-oriented degrees and other opportunities at these institutions. We will hear directly from alumni, faculty, and administrators about these institutions, their history, their culture, their importance, and we'll even spend some time dispelling some of the myths or the common myths associated with HBCUs, TCUs, and other minority-serving institutions. We'll get started with Erica Vincent. I just gave her introduction, but I'll give it again. She's my Spelman sister. I'm so glad to see her. She's played a key part in shaping the Eco Leaders community and this particular conference in her time here with the National Wildlife Federation. She's a proud native of New York, New Jersey. Erica Vincent is a 2010 departmental honor graduate of Spelman College with her bachelor's degree in comparative women's studies. Currently, Erica serves as the Network Engagement Director for the PowerShift Network, which is a decentralized network of 90+ organizations that mobilizes the collective power of young people to help mitigate climate change and create a just, clean energy future and resilient, thriving communities for all. With over a decade in the work of environmental justice, Erica's personal and professional passion is to provide resources and in-depth leadership development to communities of color, including, but not limited to, historically Black colleges and universities, like her beloved alma mater. So with that said, I'm going to gladly get ready to pass it over to Erica. Erica, we would love to hear more from you about your experience at Spelman College. What did you study there? I know we talked a little bit about that in your bio, so maybe how did you go from there to the work you're doing now? How did you decide to study at Spelman College? And what would you say to high school students that are currently considering studying at an HBCU?
I just unmuted. Can everybody hear me? Okay. We've been on Zoom for a year now, and I still do that all the time, so no worries, Crystal. Thank you so much for that gracious introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I am really excited to be here with you. As Crystal mentioned, I started out my career professionally, actually, after a few internships with working for the National Wildlife Federation, and worked there from 2012 2012 to 2018. So almost 6 years. I quit maybe 2 months before I would have been there for 6 years, and moved on to another organization. So I am so excited to be back here with the Eco Leaders community, speaking about my experience as a student and an alumna of Spelman College. So as Crystal mentioned, Spelman College is an HBCU. It's located in Atlanta, Georgia. And I studied, as in my bio mentioned, I studied comparative women's studies at Spelman. And people do often ask me the question how I got from comparative women's studies to the work I do now, which is a very interesting story that has many facets and many parts. But I will say that I joined a couple of extracurricular activities and found myself involved in a student organization at Morehouse College, which is right across the street, which is a all-male institution. Spelman is an traditionally all-female institution. And so I found myself kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. I entered Spelman as a sociology major, sociology pre-law, and realized very quickly that law school was not the path that I wanted to take. And so I ended up kind of shuffling around, to be very honest. And that's kind of the beginning of my advice for maybe some of the high school students who are or will be listening to this. Shuffling around in college is okay. I think that we get, we're oftentimes asked when we're younger, I think it's unfair to ask little kids what they want to be when they grow up. It's a fun question, but there's so many things, there's so many careers, there's so many passions that they may have that takes them in so many different directions. And so when we are, requiring people who are 17 years old to, decide on a major and then, inferring that this will shape their whole lives or their whole life, I think that that's kind of misguided in some ways. Certainly, like most of my friends who studied bio are doctors and went to medical school and things like that. But for some majors, especially at liberal arts institutions, you really could take things wherever you like. So that's kind of part of the beginning of my advice. And so I ended up studying comparative women's studies. Comparative women's studies and international studies are like a joint requirement in the sense that you have to take one or the intro to one or the other in order to graduate at Spelman. I believe that's still the case, if I'm not mistaken. And I decided to go the comparative women's studies route as I was trying to fulfill that general education requirement. And when I went the comparative women's studies route, I just fell in love with the subject and fell in love with the teachers at the Women's Research and Resource Center at Spelman College, fell in love with the subject matter and what we were learning. I took a lot of really, really fantastic classes while I was a comparative women's studies major that were just very, very interesting to me. It didn't feel too much like work. Certainly I had plenty of papers and presentations, but it didn't feel too much like work to learn and to read about this stuff. It was very, very interesting to me. And so I studied comparative women's studies. And when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do, much to the dismay of my mother, she asked me, okay, so you're changing your major. What are you going to do with that? And I cavalierly, casually, with Spelman being as much as it is a year, said, I'm not sure. And that kind of gave her a bit of pause. And she was like, I'm going to need you to figure it out. So I did think about a lot of different things, and people take that major a lot of different places, which is why I think it's such a cool major to be a part of. And so when I decided to join this environmental student organization at Morehouse, when I decided to join this student organization, I just started to really fall in love with the community engagement aspect of it. They were talking a lot about environmental justice, which was very, very kind of a new term at the time that people weren't really using. It wasn't a new term, but it certainly wasn't a widespread conversation. And so I definitely started to really fall in love with the community engagement aspect of it. Environmental justice, what is this? What is environmentalism? What is climate change? And what does all of that mean? And with that being said, I decided to really throw myself into these extracurricular activities. So studying comparative women's studies at the same time that I was really gaining and rising in the work at this student organization, and we were going to conferences. There's a really great conference called the Power Shift Conference. I work with Power Shift Network. I'm happy to talk more about that conference later if you're interested in learning more, because it's happening on April 16th through the 25th virtually. And I realized when I went to Power Shift, after having been involved in this particular organization, I was sold, that's really what I wanted to do, was devote my life to environmental justice. And so fast forward, that's what I decided to do. And in the beginning of my career, you know, as Crystal mentioned in my bio, it's been about a little over a decade. And in the beginning of my career, I used to say, I don't really use my degree that much in my work. And I push back on that now to 23-year-old Erica, because I do use this in my work, and I see that more and more. I took really cool classes like Women in Social Resistance Movements, Black Women's Status, Achievement, Impact in American Culture. I'm trying to think of some other classes. Of course, I took Feminist Theory, which is like the final course before you graduate. And I really find now that the intersectionality between being a Black woman, between being involved in environmental justice, and the intersectionalities of the multiple layers of personhood that exist within me are really deeply a part of the lens through which I see my work, and deeply a part of the lens through which I see the passions that are really integral to me. So I really kind of revel in the opportunity to have gone to Spelman. I wanted to go to Spelman since I was very small, and then changed my mind a couple times, and then ended up going after spending time at the overnight program, which is called Spellbound for new students who are accepted, and really just fell in love with the campus, with the traditions, and with how much you really are held and cared for by your faculty and by the staff at Spelman College. And I'll close by talking a little bit about Sustainable Spelman, which did not exist when I was at Spelman, but does exist now. And it's really a program where Spelman has thrown itself into wanting to be a sustainable campus and into wanting to work towards sustainable goals for the school. Now the board has a policy. Spelman College Board of Trustees has a policy that every campus will be built to LEED gold standards, whether they get the certification or not. And so really the school dedicating itself to that, I think, has really created even more fertile ground for people to be involved in the environmental movement and environmental work while attending Spelman College. So I'll close with that. Thank you, Crystal, so much for giving me that opportunity. And I'm looking forward to hearing your questions later on.
Absolutely, and thank you for putting that plug out for Power Shift Network and the next big event that we all need to be participating in. Thanks, Erica. So for now, I'm going to move over to Josh, and I'm glad he was able to get connected again with technology. You never know what's going to happen, but since he's here, I would like to you all to hear from him next. Josh is a conservation leader in the Atlanta, Georgia community. When Josh was a student at Morehouse College, so we're still in Atlanta and part of what we call the AUC, the Atlanta University Center, he became the vice president of Morehouse, More Green, which they have a wonderful Instagram too, by the way, you should follow. He's a student, which More Green is a student-led organization that focused on sustainability, wildlife conservation, and environmental justice. He has championed a collaborative with the Georgia Autobahn, and as a chapter of Autobahn on campus, More Green participated in a grant to support conservation efforts of students and faculty attending historically Black colleges and universities, tribal colleges, and other minority serving institutions. Most recently, Josh created a project, Aves, which was funded by the Walton Grant, which is an online program to educate communities on bird conservation through do-it-yourself activities. So with all that said, Josh, we have pretty much the same question for you. What did you study at Morehouse? How did you decide to study there? And what would you like to add maybe to Erica's overview of why high school students should consider studying at an HBCU?
Here we are. Okay. So I recently graduated Morehouse in December of 2020, and I was a psychology major with a focus in animal behavior. And that all started freshman year when I was working with Dr. Dwayne Jackson in his laboratory. But aside from that, I've been doing environmental work through Morehouse for my entire career there. And Morehouse, man, when I first got there, I was a totally different person. And mind you, I didn't even want to go to an HBCU when I first started because of just where I grew up and, all the resources that were available to me at the time. Everything was pointing to a PWI. And at the time, I was also a high school student doing early college enrollment with Georgia State. So I already had credits with them. So it would have been an easy process for me to just transfer to Georgia State's downtown campus and just continue during that track. But just speaking with different people and meeting other people from HBCUs, I realized that the lens that was painted about HBCUs was incorrect, honestly. I hear people talking about HBCUs as being party schools or institutions that don't really give you, let's say, a growing or developing career choice. Not career choice, but education, excuse me. And just going through my own experience from Morehouse for those 4 years, I can tell you I've grown and I've developed, and I'm so much different from the person that I was freshman year. Freshman year, I was unfocused. I didn't have a set goal or a set path. And well, that's not true. I didn't have, let's say, a lot of experience. Let's say that. And going through Morehouse, I was able to be built as an educator and also as someone who is a professional. And I honestly don't think I would have been grown. No, I keep saying grown. I wouldn't have been developed the same way at Morehouse if I went to Georgia State. Just because Morehouse is just filled with Black culture, and me personally, I don't think Georgia State would have prepared me for the real world that Morehouse College did, and also the AUC as a whole. So my experience with Morehouse has just been amazing. It's been, any synonym that can go with amazing will probably just talk about my entire experience with Morehouse College. It's memorable. I've met so many people, and the networking pool that Morehouse offers is just out of this world. And you get to see more people who look just like you in different fields at that. And for me, my field is in conservation, and I saw other people who are interested in conservation at Morehouse. And that happened with Morehouse More Green when we started that organization and just reaching out to as many students as we possibly can. And then eventually we started to reach out from outside of the AUC just to have a broader community, because conservation is not just one voice. It's not just not one race. It's everyone, because we're affected by conservation as a whole. So that was been pretty much Morehouse More Green's mission, and just reaching and advocating for conservation and bringing more people of color into the fight and into the conversation. Because I've always said I wanted to put people into the room, but I think it's best to have people at the table and actually giving and actually being a part of the conversation instead of being talked around. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I hope I answered all your questions.
I think you did. Again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box, and we'll get to that after we've introduced all of the panelists. So next up, and thank you again, Josh, we would like to hear from Rebecca Edler. So Rebecca is the acting director of the Sustainable Development Institute, the College of Menominee Nation. The college, which is located on the Menominee Indian Reservation in Kashina, Wisconsin, is a tribal college that serves both Native and non-Native students. Rebecca is also the sustainability coordinator at the Institute. Her work as the sustainability coordinator encompasses overseeing campus sustainability projects, such as the annual greenhouse gas inventory and solar energy research. In addition to this, she oversees grant-funded research projects in the area of food sovereignty, forest health, and climate change. However, her favorite work entails mentoring student interns. Rebecca oversees the student intern program at the Institute, a program that provides science-based learning experiences through an Indigenous lens. Prior to this work, Rebecca was the director of the American Indian Center of the Fox Valley, a program of Goodwill Industries of Northeast Wisconsin, as well as working in the area of quality assurance at a Fortune 500 company. So Rebecca holds a master's degree in counseling, higher education, a bachelor's degree in social science, and an associate's degree in supervisory management. She holds the value of traditional American Indian teachings to be equal to degree certifications, and she believes everyone has something to contribute. So with that said, I am grateful to hear Rebecca's contributions right now to this conversation. Rebecca, please tell us about the Sustainability Development Institute at the College of Menominee Nation and about the experiential learning opportunities that it provided to students there. What drew you to working at the College of Menominee Nation, and what do you feel it has to offer potential students?
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I have to say, I always feel very old when I hear all of the things that I've done. But I do have a presentation, so if I just share my screen, will that work?
Yes, ma'am, it should. We'll let you know that we're good on this end.
Can you see this?
Yes, we can. It doesn't look like it's in presentation mode, however. I feel like earlier when we had this problem. Oh, there we go. Good. You're all set. Mm-hmm.
All right, so I want to start out by sharing where I'm located. So if you look at the area on the left, it shows our treaty lands. And you can see, if you're familiar with the state of Wisconsin, you have this area of the Thumb and the Green Bay Packers that everyone knows is located at the bottom of this water. So you can see by looking at the state of Wisconsin on the right, the actual shrinkage of our land from our original territory. This is a picture of the Sustainable Development Institute. We are part of the College of Menominee Nation. We're located at the very south end of the campus. Our building is actually an old restaurant that the tribe purchased, and we have a small staff. Actually, I think we have 7 people now that are working at the Institute. So what shaped SDI? The Sustainable Development Institute was founded along with the College of Menominee Nation. So we were founded in 1994. We are a land-grant institution. And the community members came together at that time that said, we need to have an institute, a Sustainable Development Institute, that focused on the work that is built around the way the Menominee think about sustainability. So sustainability for us goes back hundreds of years. It's actually written into some of our treaties. And some of our past leaders have provided direction as to how we should sustainably manage our forests. 98% of our land, we have about 235,000 acres, are forested. So we are known throughout the world for our sustainable forest. And so taking a look at and reflecting on the works of our ancestors and their thoughts on sustainability, the Institute was founded. And our Institute includes staff, faculty, researchers, scientists, community members, and of course, our students. So the activity at the Institute and at the college is built off of the Menominee theoretical model of sustainability. So a lot of the models that you see are three-pronged models. However, the Menominee model, which is a community based or driven model, has 6 dimensions. So starting at the very top is land and sovereignty. Moving down to the right is natural resources. And the one with the little building represents institutions. And then there's technology, economics, and the area, the dimension with the hands, with the eye, represents human behavior and ways of looking at things. And then if you look at the center is the Menominee autochthony. And autochthony means coming from this place. So now when you look at this model, our way of looking at, and I don't really like to say analyzing, but the way that we view this or view sustainability. So sustainability to us means maintaining the balance between these dimensions. So this model is used in decision making. It's used in our way of thinking, so that each dimension is by itself, but each dimension interacts with all the other dimensions. And then as we move through our decision-making processes, we use this model and way of thinking. This model is intergenerational, and it's always evolving. So decision-making, sometimes if there may be a conflict. So say, for instance, you're making a decision to put in a road. So using the model, then you would look at each one of these dimensions and see how would putting in this road affect each one of these dimensions. And sometimes you do see the tensions between them. It may be economically feasible, but it may not make sense with our natural resource dimension. It may have an impact on our land and sovereignty, but maybe that is different than the way technology would view that. So that's a simple example of how this model is used. And again, it's always the thinking is from this place. So one of the things that we do every year is we have a summer planning, or an Indigenous Summer Planning Institute. It's open to everyone, where we bring together participants from across the United States who talk about Indigenous planning and concepts and opportunities. We introduce our participants to climate change models, and the effects of climate change, what's going on in Indian country and what's going on across the United States, Alaska, Hawaii, also other indigenous individuals throughout the world. Generally, we're together for a week. We do show the participants around the Menominee Forest. We talk about Menominee sustainable forestry. And again, we go over the model of the Menominee theoretical model of sustainability. It's a wonderful place for our individuals or our cohort to meet future professionals, scientists, and other students across the United States. So at the Sustainable Development Institute, we have a couple of focus areas. They are climate change and forest research, again, because of our rich history of sustainability and forest research. We also started about 5 years ago now. We really started taking a look at food sovereignty and sustainable agriculture. We, of course, have campus sustainability, and that includes our campus greenhouse gas inventory, looking at solar installs. We have a wind turbine. We have green buildings, and just really taking a look at how do we move away from using fossil fuels to different alternative energies. So that's one of our focus areas. And again, the one that's my favorite is our student enrichment program, where we work with student interns and students across campus. So some of our student opportunities that we have here at the Institute, I just want to point out this picture here is our outside classroom. So you can see here that we do live in the forest, and we enjoy being in the forest. So some of the opportunities here that we have is our undergrad internships. We have always a number of student worker positions, so students that maybe don't qualify for an internship or may not be interested in a full semester internship, we can bring them on as student workers. We have work study students, and we also have youth workers from the high school that join us every summer. They help us with special projects or also help us with our agriculture projects, or sometimes with our forest work. We also have grad students that come and work with us on special projects, and postdoctoral researchers come and work with us. And we also have, lastly but not leastly, we do have a summer high school program where we work with high school students, and it's called SLC. It's our Sustainable Leadership Cohort. Generally, we have between 10 and 15 students that come on campus and work on a project. This year, our focus is air. So the students will be learning all about the air and about that area. So that's the end of my presentation. I have to figure out how to stop sharing.
There you go.
Did I stop?
You did. We're good.
Okay. Let me find out how to get back to where I was. There you go. So that's a little bit of information about the Institute, about what we do, about our model, which we focus. Our work is all centered around the Menominee theoretical model. I have worked at the college now for, I want to say, I always have to look up because there's my certificate. It's about 13 years now, and I've been here at the Institute for about 8 years. So I have had a career before I came here. I didn't start my college life until much later in life. So I've had an interesting path getting here. But I do love the work that I'm doing now. I love, like I said, I love working with students, and I love being able to share the Menominee story of sustainability. So our campus, currently we have around, I want to say 300 students, maybe a little bit down from that. I think about 60 or 70% now are American Indian students. But we are open to all, and we welcome everyone to our campus.
All right, thank you, Rebecca, so much for sharing, and it was so interesting to hear more about your experiences there. So I will move on to our next panelist, Dr. Alfredo Gonzalez. Alfredo is a professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, their School of Architecture, and he is the founding director of the Natural Energies Advancement Technology. I wanted to get that right. The acronym is NEAT, which I think is also NEAT, the laboratory there. Alfredo's research interest spans sustainable development and planning, energy efficiency, and green design, passive and low energy heating and cooling systems for buildings, and the design of building integrated water harvesting, treatment, and reuse systems. Alfredo has been the recipient of numerous prestigious teaching awards from UNLV, the Carnegie Foundation, and others, and his research and creative work has earned awards from the U.S. Green Building Council, the Architect Research Centers Consortium, and the American Institute of Architects. Alfredo received his bachelor's of architecture from the Universidad La Salle in Mexico City, and his specialist in solar architecture degree in 1996 from the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and his master's of architecture in 1999 from the University of Oregon. That is a lot. So I am very happy to introduce you all to Alfredo. We would love to hear more from you about the NEAT laboratory, as well as how it both advances research and enhances the students' experience at UNLV. And if you could also speak to your experience at a Hispanic serving institution, whether that was considered in your decision to teach there and how it impacts your faculty experiences.
Thank you very much, Crystal, for your kind introduction. Like Rebecca mentioned, when you said so many things about me, I start to feel a bit old, but I'm actually a bit old, so I suppose that's okay. Let me start by sharing some facts and statistics about UNLV that I think are important for our attendees to know. UNLV is designated as an Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander serving institution. It is also designated as a Hispanic serving institution. And so UNLV in many ways reflects the diversity of our community. Las Vegas actually is a very diverse, multicultural city. Sometimes people don't realize that when they visit just the casinos and spend time on the Las Vegas Strip, but the reality is that we have a very interesting sort of fabric, and the tapestry of our city is very rich. And so we're very glad to see that the student population at UNLV in fact reflects the richness and diversity of our community. To give your attendees also some sort of points of sort of information, UNLV, while it is a very high research productivity institution, so we're a doctoral granting Carnegie R1 institution, we have statistics from this past fall. 65% of the students enrolled at UNLV are minority students. So 65 is a really good figure. And so I would say, I put a plug for my institution. So anyone out there who's participating in this conference and still exploring institutions, so recognize and know that UNLV would be a place where you likely will feel welcome because of its rich diversity, and of course the many career opportunities and trajectories that exist. So now I'm going to try to answer some of the questions that Crystal asked me. So first, let me say that yes, evidently, to teach in an institution that values diversity is it's a factor that for me personally is important. I have taught at couple other higher education institutions in the United States. I will not be mentioning names, but I can certainly tell you that the diversity of these communities obviously a selling point for me, or has been the reason why I'm still here after 18 years. Now that said, and focusing more on the sustainable careers, which is in part the theme of the session. My work has been marked by my experiences, and I would say to our attendees, high school students, young professionals, and college students, that years in college, as our panelists, Joshua and Erica particularly talked about that, are very formative. It's a time in which you really design your life. As an architect, I always see the value of design just about everywhere. And so just as we design buildings in architecture, well, I also believe that the college years are a period of reflection where we can design our future, right? You can, as was said, you can start in a certain place, but then change directions as you begin to discover opportunities or develop an affinity for subject matters or value and cherish the experiences provided by others. So be very open to that personal growth that happens in college. And UNLV is an institution that creates an environment where you can explore and pursue different careers. Our institution has really good track record of very active student organizations. And I think that was mentioned earlier by our panelists, being part or being involved in student organizations, it's a critical activity. I'll just mention, for example, our Student Sustainability Council was recipient in 2019 of a Gold Certificate for Community Engagement Award. And in 2018, it received an internal UNLV award for being the groundbreaker organization. So that tells you that these are very active student organizations where, for example, our Student Sustainability Council is very much involved in the recycling program that we have here at UNLV, which is, by the way, a fantastic program. The Student Sustainability Council is also involved in the management of our community garden. So, as you know, urban agriculture is an important component of resilient and sustainable cities. And so UNLV has community garden that is used as a vehicle to not only create community for students to participate, but also, of course, to engage with people out there in the Las Vegas Valley. Now, more specifically about my work, so the Natural Energies Advanced Technologies Lab, or the NEAT Lab, yes, we were very deliberate with our acronym. We basically have tried to recognize that sustainability requires, and I really like what Rebecca said about the autochthonous sort of tradition, right? So we have to recognize the strengths of place. And that's kind of what my lab attempts to do. So do research that is, culturally sensitive, that looks at technologies that are appropriate in terms of not only price, but tradition and technology, appropriate to the place in which they are deployed. All of these with the effort or with the hope of developing solutions that benefit our natural environment. So that said, I'll just quickly share one project, that has been very interesting to me because it has gone sort of full circle. I worked with passive solar energy pioneer in the development of a system called roof ponds. So imagine a roof pond as a pond of water or a waterbed on top of your ceiling, if you wish to sort of think of it that way, that is used as your heating and cooling system. And I started that research in a previous institution in a cold climate. Then I brought it here to UNLV, which is a hot and dry climate. So we have found, for example, that in Las Vegas, as hot as it is, talking to Rebecca right before this panel, I was telling her that we have had 3 consecutive days over 90 degrees. And she was saying, well, that's pretty hot. And I was saying, no, that's actually pleasant out here. But so imagine that the system that we have developed, speaking of these sort of autochthonous technologies or natural sort of technologies, we managed to cool a small room without the need of air conditioning during the entire summer. And the temperature of that ceiling, imagine with the highest temperature of the year of that experiment was 114 degrees. The temperature of that ceiling never reached 83 degrees. So it always stayed below that, because of that roof pond and the evaporation technologies we had with it. So that's the kind of sustainability work that I do, that I work, that I'm interested in doing. These can be applied to, for example, emergency housing, refugee housing, disaster relief, as well as obviously our homes on an everyday basis. And that is why I feel it's important as you select the institution and the experiences that you wish to attain as an undergraduate student to really focus on impact. As I mentioned, it's about designing your life, it's about designing your career, but it's also about finding things that you're passionate about that would have some impact in mitigating climate change or, definitely, bettering the quality of life of your community. At UNLV, and of course, the School of Architecture and the NEET Lab, we invite you and welcome you. We're a community that is looking for ways to have a significant impact to improve the human condition, which I believe is along the lines of what all of our panelists have discussed. That's really much of what moves us and the work that we do. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, and it's been great hearing from all the panelists. I'm very excited, however, to get straight into the questions. We have some great questions lined up for all of you. So again, just wanted to thank you for taking time to share a little bit about your institutions and your passions. So with that said, I believe this first question is geared towards Erica and Josh, just to get ready for it. So Josh touched on some of the myths about HBCUs with regards to being portrayed as a party school, or that academic offerings are not as rigorous or as broad as predominantly white institutes. Some also say that the student bodies are not diverse, or that they are all either more or less expensive, among others. So again, Erica and Josh, could you speak to some of these myths, please?
Sure, I'm happy to start, and then I will definitely hand it over to Josh, having been at an HBCU far more recent than me. I would say, number one, I missed what you said, Josh, about HBCUs being a party school. Very interesting to me, given what I know about other schools in Georgia. But I really want to speak to the point you made in your question, Crystal, about the student bodies not being diverse. I say this all the time, and many people say this all the time, so this is not, a coined phrase by me or anything, but no one race of people is a monolith, Black people included. And so with just because people have the same or share the same race or ethnicity, and I can imagine that Rebecca and Alfredo would have the same points to make at their own institutions about being a monolith and about everyone being the same. I can tell you that some of the conversations and the experiences that I discussed and that where we came from with my Spelman sisters are some of the most diverse. And Crystal, I know you can speak to that as well as a Spelman woman yourself. So many different backgrounds and walks of life. Some folks are first generation college students. Some folks are Spelman legacy and 3 or 4 generations of Spelman women. Some folks are, more well-to-do, for lack of a better word. Some folks are really, paying their way through college or working their way through college quite literally. So those experiences alone, and I talked about in my presentation or in my time to talk about multiple layers of personhood and multiple layers of through which you see the world and the lenses through which you see the world. And so those different layers of personhood for so many different people are not, a monolith across the race. And so that alone creates very rich and robust, discussions in class and conversations outside of, the classroom. And then I'll say this quickly and then hand it over to Josh. Additionally, with classes not being as rigorous, I can certainly tell you that I didn't, in conversations or with friends or colleagues who did not go to HBCUs now, I can definitely tell you that some of the classes were just as, if not more rigorous. And I'll also say that what I loved about going to school at Spelman is the interesting nature of my courses. So they weren't, they were so interesting, especially in my in my major, they were so different and so interesting and so innovative in the way that my teachers taught them, my professors taught them, even more so. So I definitely don't feel any way not prepared for the real world based on my college experience. And I think that's because Spelman College was just as rigorous, if not more so, than some other schools. And also, I definitely had a multitude of diverse experiences in my classrooms and on campus with me, with my Spelman sisters.
Thanks, Erica. Josh, you want to jump in?
Yeah, and I just want to add, just like Erica, Morehouse College and well, really the AUC as a whole is a very, very welcoming institution, and I see people from all different kinds of life there, and I'm talking about queer, straight, or whatever you want to say, and then also with different races as well. There are people of Latin descent who are also at Morehouse College in education there. So I just want to go ahead and debunk saying that HBCUs are not diverse. You see different kinds of people there. And I want to go ahead and continue off on a different question in terms of whether it's being rigorous, or if it's not hard, or basically what I'm saying is at Morehouse, when I was there, I've heard all about Morehouse not being a hard college. And when I took my classes, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you that is not true. The courses are rigorous, and they're preparing you for the real world. And you get different kinds of classes and courses that pertains to your major, but also courses about life in general. I believe that Spelman, they have ADW, I want to say, and that's a course that talks about I believe Erica can speak more about it, but it just those courses themselves just prepare you for the real world, and I think that's pretty much that. All I really wanted to add, because Erica kind of pretty much talked about the gist of culture and AUC. But I also want to say that when you come to HBCUs or when you go to the AUC, just be prepared to be developed. Have an open mind when you come to campus, because you're going to meet different kinds of people with different kinds of personalities. So you want to be prepared or adaptable to be able to navigate through those institutions.
Okay, sounds good. And Erica did put what ADW stood for down in the chat for anybody that wants to follow that conversation. I will jump to the next question, which is very similar to that question, but more so addressed to Alfredo and Rebecca. I think more specifically Rebecca, actually. It says some of the same myths are believed about TCUs and other MSIs. And additionally, many assume that TCUs are only for Native or Indigenous students. Rebecca, would you speak to some of those same assumptions about student identity and academics, and what you might say to non-Native students interested in a TCU? So.
Right, thank you. Yes, it's very true that a lot of individuals, in fact, even our people that live locally, think that the College of Menominee Nation is only for Native students, which that's probably one of our greatest myths, along with what Joshua and Elijah said as well, is that a lot of times we're perceived as not being as rigorous. And I apologize for saying your name wrong. The other thing is that, and I want to say this is maybe an overall perception, is that all Native people are the same. They don't realize that there are numerous different tribes. And we at the college have at least 52, I think it was the last semester, 52 different tribes represented at the college. So that's one thing. I think it's an advantage for non-Native students to attend tribal college, is that you really can learn about Native people, about the tribes, about how the different the tribal cultures are different, the tribal nations are different, and you really can get to, it's silly as it sounds, get to meet tribal individuals. Some of the more of the perceptions is that the Native people receive all their education for free, which is totally not true. Another misconception is that there's money or handouts to everyone, especially since the casinos came on board. There's a perception that all Native people are just rolling in the money from the casinos, which is, again, a huge misunderstanding. I just wanted to add that students that come to the College of Menominee Nation, we do prepare them for moving on to other institutions. So a lot of our programs are 2-year degree programs, and the students move out of here and move on to like the UW-Madison's, UW-GB. We have a pre-engineering with UW-Platteville. So even though I would say, though, that because we are a tribal college, because we are a community-based college, and we do not have housing, so one of the things is that a lot of our students are local, just because we don't have housing. So we really have our student population usually lives here, starts school here, but then moves on to these other institutions to finish their degrees if that's the route that they choose.
Thank you, Rebecca. And we do have one more question directed towards you, Alfredo. So I do want to go over that before we run out of time here. And I was just given permission if we need to go over a little bit. So Alfredo, this question is for you. Within academia, we are familiar with HBCUs, TCUs, and other minority serving institutions, institute classifications. And in the general population, there's familiarity with HBCUs and TCUs have grown. Can you speak about the classification of University of Nevada, Las Vegas as a Hispanic Serving Institute and an Asian American and Native American Pacific Islander Serving Institute? How is it similar to and different from the HBCUs and TCU classifications? And what should the students in attendance know about HSIs in general?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. I'll try to answer quickly. To get that classification, what that means is at least 25% of the students at UNLV would be of Hispanic descent, and to get the Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander, you would have to have at least 10% of the students coming from that group. As I mentioned, UNLV has 65% of its students come from different minorities. And I think, as was said by our panelists, both Eric and Josh talked about the diversity that even exists when you have even when you assume that there's a monolithic culture, there's still great diversity within the institutions themselves. So I really like what Josh sort of said as kind of his concluding remarks, that you have to come with an open mind. But you should do that always and every time, because the benefit of the college experience is precisely that, to learn from others, to really be open to change your life by opening up and gaining from the experiences and opportunities that are in front of you. So you can go to the college that is most diverse in the planet, but if you go with a closed-minded attitude, you will get nothing out of that diversity. And likewise, you might be in situations where there's a lack of diversity, but being really open and receptive might create opportunities for you to find ways to thrive. So as what students experience here, I would say, or I would characterize that, we have also, and we didn't talk much about the issue in this panel, but we have also a large first generation student population And we see that as from an academic and faculty perspective as one of the greater challenges, right? Because some of these students have not had role models or people who might help them thrive or prepare them to be successful in college. And we see that, and we have that upon us to ensure that students don't fall through the cracks and that they find, as I say, the opportunities to thrive and do well. That's a concern that this university has very present. That's something that you will likely find in HSI institutions, and I would imagine in all of the institutions that are represented in this panel, the concern for students to thrive. But as I mentioned, and I'd like to end with that, your success in college really depends on having that open attitude and that inquisitive nature and the willingness to learn from others. Without that, it's very difficult to do well.
Thank you so much for those responses, and I think that's a really great note to wrap up this session on so that we can get back on time. I do see that we have someone else that's joining, but I believe we are preparing. Well, let me give this announcement first. The Careers in Journalism panel will be on the main stage, so I wanted to announce that. But I also wanted to encourage folks to join the lounge room. Is that all right, David? I'm double checking with my folks here. They're retyping some stuff, but it seems like the conversation can continue to go on in the lounge. David or Courtney, chime in if you rather me announce that another way. Are we good? Okay, I think we're good. So again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, panelists, for joining us. And we look forward to reconnecting with you all throughout the rest of this conference. So we will see you later. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.